All right, welcome to everybody. Turn your Bibles to the book of 1 Samuel. 1 Samuel. We're studying this Old Testament book in this class. In our introductory class, we talked about Hannah and Elkanah, and we talked about Hannah's sadness over not having a child and her prayer, heartfelt prayer that God would give her a child, her vow that he would be given to the Lord to serve the Lord for his whole life. And so we're going to pick that up today. Hannah kept that vow. Hannah was a woman in a very dark period of time, the Judges. In fact, there's some passages we'll look at today that show that Samuel, the book of Samuel, is certainly a continuation of the book of Judges. And it is still basically in the period of the Judges as we start out. Eli is considered one of the judges of Israel. Samuel is considered a judge of Israel. And this word judge, we think of judge as like, you go to court and you have a judge, but that's really not the meaning of this word in the Bible. It means a deliverer, it means a ruler, it can mean a wise person, but it has different flavors. And a lot of the judges weren't very nice people, including this priest Eli, who was a corrupt priest. At least his family was corrupt. So Hannah kept her vow, and when the child was weaned, she brings the boy to Eli to serve the Lord. Now, a little interesting factoid. Samuel and Ishmael are pretty much the same name. Both names mean God heard. There is a verb in Hebrew, shama, which means to hear, to listen. And remember in the book of Genesis, Hagar went out in the desert with Samuel and thought they were going to die, and she prayed to God, and God heard her prayer. And so, the boy was named Ishmael. God heard. All right? Hannah prayed a prayer to God, and God heard her prayer. And so Shamuel is shama. It's that verb. It means God heard. See? They're slightly different in Hebrew. One might mean God will hear. One might mean God heard past tense, but it's the same name. God heard the prayer of those two women, and that's the idea of the name. Okay, so Hannah's prayer that you find in 1 Samuel chapter 2 is very interesting. It's a poetic prayer, as if it's a prophetic prayer, and it may well be a prophecy that came out of this woman's mouth. But starting in verse 3 of 1 Samuel chapter 2, the prayer is very interesting because in this prayer is a set of beliefs, a set of convictions, a theology, if you will, that pretty well tells you what the book of 1 Samuel is going to be about. So, talk no more proudly, let not arrogance come from your mouth, for the Lord is a God of knowledge, and by him actions are weighed. Now, as you go through the book of 1 and 2 Samuel, God is going to weigh the actions of the kings that they pick, like Saul and David and the rest. He's going to weigh the actions of priests and prophets, and he's, according to the actions of those people, God is going to act. He's either going to bless or curse, and so this is insightful. The bows of the mighty are broken. So you might be in power now, but God can take you out of power. The book of Daniel says the Lord removes kings and he sets up kings, and he does that, see? So the bows of the mighty are broken, the feeble bind on strength, those who are full have hired themselves out for bread. In other words, God can raise people up, God can bring people down, and does. And if you read 1 and 2 Samuel, you have a bunch of raising up and pulling down that goes on as far as people go. And it depends on their actions toward God, whether they serve God or they didn't serve God. She says, the barren has borne 7, but she who has many children is forlorn. And this, of course, is talking about her own life, where she saw God raise her up and God bring her arrogant fellow there down. The Lord kills and brings to life. He brings down to Sheol and raises up. The Lord makes poor and makes rich. He brings low and he exalts. Think about David, shepherd boy. Then he was king. See what I'm saying? Saul, he was king and he was brought down. See, so it doesn't depend on what we think or what we try. It depends on whether you trust the Lord or whether you don't trust the Lord. At least that's the idea in the book of Samuel. He raises up the poor from the dust. He lifts the needy from the ash heap to make them sit with princes and inherit a seat of honor. For the pillars of the earth are the Lord's, and on them he has set the world. He will guard the feet of his faithful ones. See, that's kind of the underlying theme of the book of 1st and 2nd Samuel. If you're faithful to God, God will take care of you. See? The wicked shall be cut off in darkness, for not by might shall a man prevail. Remember, David goes out and fights the giant, and the giant should have killed him easily, But not by might shall a man prevail. The adversaries of the Lord will be broken to pieces. And if you remember what David said to the giant, and the giant said to David, it was all about this right here. So this prayer, what I'm trying to tell you is this prayer is much more in the books of 1st and 2nd Samuel than just one woman's prayer. It is a theological statement about the way things are between God and people and how things work between God and people. It is this woman's faith that this is how God deals with things, based on whether you trust him or whether you don't. So, not by might shall a man prevail. The adversaries of the Lord shall be broken to pieces. Against them he will thunder in heaven. The Lord will judge the ends of the earth. He will give strength to his king and exalt the horn of his anointed. Well, that's interesting because at the time that Hannah was praying this prayer, there was no king in Israel. See? But this prayer, like many of those in the Old Testament, is also a prophecy. It is talking about how God deals with his anointed. His anointed in 1st and 2nd Samuel were Saul and David, and then it leads right up to the time of Solomon. See, that starts in the book of 1 Kings, right after Samuel. These are God's anointed. Remember, David wouldn't lift a hand against the Lord's anointed. And Samuel anointed Saul, and then Samuel anointed David, etc. So, I'm just saying to you that the books of 1st and 2nd Samuel, as we studied last time, are the work of, they are authored by Samuel, Gad, and Nathan. Those three, okay? Those three prophets of God wrote the books of 1st and 2nd Samuel, okay? And this prayer is sort of like a guide to how things are going to go throughout the teachings of this book, okay? So then after you have Hannah's prayer in 1 Samuel 2, you have a report on these wicked sons of Eli. See, Eli's the old priest, and his boys, his adult sons, are doing the actual day-to-day operations of the priesthood. They're taking the sacrifices, do all that stuff. But they're using violence even in threats, and they're stealing the bigger part of the sacrificial meat. They're taking advantage of women and having sexual relationships with the women that come to the tabernacle to offer sacrifices. They're terribly corrupt priests, and it tells you all that in the last part of chapter 2 about these two boys. So it says here in verse 22, now Eli was very old, and he heard everything his sons did to all Israel, and how they lay with the women who assembled at the door of the tabernacle of meeting. And he said to them, why do you do such things? For I hear of your evil doings from all the people. No, my sons, for it is not a good report that I hear. Well, that's real nice, but he didn't really stop them from doing what they were doing. He said, you shouldn't do stuff like that. But they kept doing stuff like that, see? And they were disgracing the priesthood. and disgracing the worship of God and the whole idea that the children of Aaron were to be God's holy priesthood. And God was not pleased. So let's rewind here for a minute and set this setting. There's this woman that has a heart that really wants to seek God. She prays earnestly. She has this baby boy. This little boy, however old he was, 2 or 3, whatever. I don't know when they weaned him back that time. He could have been 4 or 5. I don't know. But they brought him to the tabernacle at Shiloh. And they left him in a den of vipers. They left him in a corrupt place. This was supposed to be God's priest. And these were corrupt priests and an old man that wasn't taking care of the priesthood. And it was not a good situation for this little boy to be left in. And yet this little boy would turn out to be the greatest individual in hundreds of years, including the kings, that ever had an effect on Israel. In my book, when you read about the book of 1st and 2nd Samuel, Samuel is head and shoulders spiritually above any of the kings and above any of the rest of them. He is the man of God that's trying to pull these people out of darkness into doing what the Lord tells them to do. So, at the end of this chapter, God says, "And this that shall come upon your 2 sons, Hophni and Phinehas, shall be the sign to you. Both of them shall die on the same day, and I will raise up for myself a faithful priest who shall do according to what is in my mind," my heart and my mind. See, this is God talking about raising up a new priest to be the leader, the head of the priesthood, who's going to lead his people in worship and in service to God in a way that hasn't been done in a couple of centuries at least. See, this is talking about Samuel. "I'll build him a sure house. He shall go in and out before my anointed." So he's going to even be an influence over the kings. We're talking about what's going to happen in the future of this book. Now, for those of you that study the Bible and look for recurring things, this verse is the parallel verse to the one all you ladies like. Yeah, all you ladies are hooked on chapter 13, where it says that David was a man after God's own heart. And you always talk about David being a man after God's own heart. But even more than David, this guy was. Because this verse goes right along with that verse. Notice the part in red. "I will raise up for myself a faithful priest who shall do according to what is in my heart." That's what it means to be after God's heart. So you're trying to do what is in God's heart instead of what is in your own heart. Let's compare it with chapter 13, where Samuel is talking to Saul. And Samuel is telling Saul that the kingdom is going to be taken away from him. "Now your kingdom shall not continue. The Lord has sought for himself a man after his own heart, and the Lord has commanded him to be commander over his people." So wait a minute, Samuel, God, you're saying you need a priest that will be after your own heart, and you need a king that will be after your own heart. See? These were different leaders of God's people. The priests were primary leaders of God's people. The kings were primary leaders of God's people. The prophets were primary leaders of God's people. For generations, everybody had been doing what was right in their own eyes. And God wanted a priest after his own heart and a king after his own heart. And he wanted prophets after his own heart instead of these people that were corrupt. Okay? So these verses are very much connected in the theology of 1st and 2nd Samuel. All right, so God sees that little boy and says that little boy is going to be a different kind of priest for me. And he gives this prophecy. So we come to 1 Samuel chapter 3. And here it says, "The boy Samuel," of course we don't know how old he was, but he was still a boy, "ministered before the Lord under Eli. In those days the word of the Lord was rare. There were not many visions." Now, in the Old Testament we have this phrase, "the word of the Lord." it'll say, the word of the Lord came to Abram. The word of the Lord came to Samuel. The word of the Lord came to Elijah. What that means is God gave a direct divine revelation to that person at that moment. God spoke very personally to that person in words and had that person pass that message along. When the word of the Lord comes to somebody, that means that somebody is a prophet. That prophet is one who gets direct revelations from God and speaks those revelations to other people. So this is one of the places that we see this, and you'll notice here that it says during that dark period of the judges when people had gotten so far from God, God wasn't speaking to them anymore. God had stopped giving revelations to prophets. He barely had anything to do with them. They were so rebellious, see? But they weren't getting visions. So let's look at this phrase for a minute. Up at the top, you don't have to worry about that. That's the Hebrew. It's Diber Yahweh. Diber Yahweh, the word of the Lord came. Genesis 15:1, after this, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. So see, at this particular place in time, God spoke directly to Abraham in language. And you have the quote, this is what I want to say to you, Abram. And you have it all there in Genesis 15 in longhand. It was a lengthy message from God to Abram. Okay, the word of the Lord came. You have this same phrase as you do in Genesis here in 1 Samuel 3, verse 1. The word of the Lord was very rare in those days. In verse 7, Samuel did not yet know the Lord. The word of the Lord had not yet been revealed unto him. See? So God had not begun speaking to Samuel as a prophet yet. He didn't know anything about these divine revelations. In chapter 15 of Samuel, when Saul, didn't kill all the Amalekites and he spared Agag the king and some of the cattle and all that stuff, then the word of the Lord came to Samuel. See, that's this same phrase, Diber Yahweh, the word of the Lord came to Samuel. 2 Samuel, before David got up the next morning, the word of the Lord came to Gad, the prophet. So see, Samuel was not the only one that had the word of the Lord come to him. You had Nathan and Gad, who are also writers of the book of 1 and 2 Samuel. The word of the Lord came to them. See? Notice here, the word of the Lord came to Gad the prophet, David's seer. Notice how he's called a prophet, and he's also called a seer. Okay, this is two different ways of talking about the same kind of person. See, I am not a prophet. There are no prophets around today. God is not directly speaking to me personally and giving me a message and saying, say it to the people. God did that, and those things are written down in God's word. See, we preach what they receive from God, but these guys were prophets. Okay? In 1 Kings, the word of the Lord came to Elijah. See, this is a phenomenon that continues 1 and 2 Kings as well as 1 and 2 Samuel. Just a little footnote here. 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, 1 Kings, 2 Kings is a continual work of different prophets. Probably Nathan, Gad, Samuel, Elijah, Elisha. Those people were responsible for those books. That's a continual story. In some Bibles, they're called 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th Kings. It's a continual story, just like Genesis through Deuteronomy is. Okay? So when you're reading the Bible story, as I've told you this before, if you want to just read the story, you read Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, Joshua, Samuel, Kings, and then Ezra and Nehemiah. That's all you need to read in the Old Testament. You'll read the story. Then you read Luke and Acts in the New Testament, and you've read the story. All right? We digress. So, the word of the Lord is coming to Samuel. Yes, sir. Yeah, in the New Testament, of course, we don't have exactly the same phraseology, but Jesus was a prophet. God spoke directly to him. He said, my teachings are not mine, but his who sent me. He whom God sent speaks the words of God. So see, he was receiving it from God and giving it out. The apostles were prophets. God gave them direct revelation. People like Luke and Mark were prophets. So you have Old Testament prophets and you have New Testament prophets. All right? So in the Old Testament, these guys were called 4 different things. They were called prophet, Navi, which just means one who receives direct revelations from God. They were called seers because they could see what was happening in the enemy's camp, and they could see what was going on in Syria, and they could see, they could see things that other people couldn't see. This was another divine revelation. They were called men of God. See, today we might all say, well, we're men of God, but not like they were. See, because in the book of 1 Samuel, a man of God is a prophet. See, and they were also called visionaries. Visionaries is like I do when I brush my teeth, I have to hack and clear my throat. Choseh. That's the Hebrew word, choseh, visionary. This is a guy that gets 3D movies on the back of his eyelids. This is like Ezekiel when he sees God flying around on his chariot throne in heaven. It's like Isaiah when he sees God on his throne. It's like the Valley of Dry Bones movie, all those are visionaries. In the 30th year, in the 4th month, in the 5th day of the month, when I was with the captives by the Kibar River, the heavens were opened and I saw visions from God. Ezekiel chapter 1. See, he was a prophet, but he was a 3D movie prophet. I asked the boys in my preaching class the other day, what do you call those things you put on your head? And what is it, Luke? It's a VR or something like that. Anyway, you put it on your head and you're in the 3D world and you can do your thing. Well, they didn't need one of those on their head. It just came right in their eyeballs. Wouldn't that be weird if you had it just right in your eyeballs without your VTR or whatever you call it? I don't know what it is either, but they did. So these are the guys, all right? And in these days, it was very rare because God didn't hardly speak to those guys. But now we have this boy, Samuel. So if you look at 1 Samuel chapter 3 with me, verse 1, the boy Samuel ministered before the Lord under Eli. In those days, the word of the Lord was rare. There were not many visions. One night, Eli, whose eyes were becoming so weak that he could barely see, was lying down in his usual place. The lamp of God had not yet gone out, and Samuel was lying down in the tabernacle or temple of the Lord where the ark of God was. Then the Lord called Samuel. Samuel answered, "Here I am." And he ran to Eli and said, "Here I am, you called me." But Eli said, "I didn't call you. Go back, lie down." And he went and lay down. And again the Lord said, "Samuel, Samuel." And Samuel got up and went to Eli and said, "Here I am, you called me." The old man said, "I did not. Go back. You're killing me. I'm trying to sleep." That's a little, he didn't actually say that. That's what I would have said to him. "You're killing me. I'm trying to sleep." All right. Now Samuel did not know the Lord. The word of the Lord had not yet been revealed to him. He wasn't used to this. He wasn't used to God speaking to him, see? And so the Lord called Samuel a third time, and he goes back to Eli, and then Eli realized that God was talking to him, and he said, "You go back, and when he calls you again, say, 'Speak, Lord. Your servant is listening.'" By the way, if you read 1st and 2nd Samuel and 1st and 2nd Kings, you'll find this phrase many times, "My servants, the prophets." My servants, the prophets. And a lot of times the kings were not God's servants, but God would say, "My servants, the prophets." Now he does say, "My servant David," see? But he doesn't say, "My servant Saul," and I don't know that he says, "My servant Solomon," but he did say, "My servant David," see? So there's something in that as well that we should take a look at. So the old man sees that he's getting a revelation, and the little boy he talks about this, and he goes back and he listens to the Lord. And the Lord gives this boy a terrifying revelation. To this little boy, he gives this prophecy that Eli is going to get killed, and his sons are going to be killed, and God's going to take vengeance on them for being disrespectful of him. And then Samuel, trembling, he goes to the old man after it's all said and done, and he says, he talked to me, and Eli says, I can tell you're nervous. Just tell me everything he said, no matter what it is. And Samuel told him the whole thing. You're going to die, and your sons are going to die, and God's going to take vengeance on you, and he's going to cut off your household from the priesthood. Think about that. Little boy, you think he was scared to speak? Sure he was. The little boy told the truth, and he told him exactly what God had done. Now, I want you to turn to 1 Samuel 3 and verse 19. 1 Samuel 3, verse 19. This is where we want to look. The Lord was with Samuel, and he grew up, and he, that is God, let none of his words fall to the ground. Now watch verse 20, very important. All Israel from Dan, that's way up in the north by Syria, to Beersheba, that's way down in the south, recognized that Samuel was attested as a prophet of God. See, this wasn't a case where Samuel said, hey, I'm a prophet. And everybody says, get out of here. Nobody thinks you're a prophet. And he claims, yeah, I'm a prophet. No, everybody in all of Israel, from Dan way in the north to Beersheba in the south, all of them recognized that Samuel was a prophet of God. Now, how did books get into the Bible? Let me give you a short answer. When the people of God universally recognize somebody to be a prophet of God, whatever that person wrote was immediately and automatically considered to be Holy Scripture. See, all Israel, from Dan to Beersheba, recognized that Samuel was a bona fide prophet of God. So the Lord appeared again at Shiloh, for the Lord revealed himself to Samuel at Shiloh by the word of the Lord. Remember, the word of the Lord was rare, and then it says Samuel didn't yet know the Lord. The word of the Lord hadn't been revealed to him, but now the word of the Lord is coming to Samuel on a regular basis. And people know in Israel that if they want to hear the word of the Lord, they go to the one that God is giving the word of the Lord. Now, also here, the word of the Lord to his prophets was just as authoritative as the word that was written down in the law of Moses. The commands of God through his prophets were just as authoritative as the 10 Commandments and the commands that were written in the law of Moses. Okay? So that's an important thing to remember when you're studying through the Bible. All right. Now comes a really weird part of this story. There's lots of weird stuff in the Bible, isn't there? But this is a really weird part of this story. So 1 Samuel 4, God told Samuel what was going to happen. So the Israelites went out, verse 1, and to fight against the Philistines. And the Israelites camped at Ebenezer and the Philistines at Aphek. And the Philistines deployed their forces to meet Israel. And as the battle spread, Israel was defeated by the Philistines, who killed about 4,000 of them on the battlefield. See, we'd think that was just awful, which it was. 4,000 killed on the battlefield. The casualty numbers of our troops in recent wars rarely go up that high. But see, these days, thousands of them met on the battlefield hand to hand, and they fought that way, and thousands were killed every time. So when the soldiers returned to camp, the elders of Israel asked, "Why did the Lord bring defeat on us today before the Philistines? Let's bring the ark of the Lord's covenant to Shiloh, so that it may go with us and save us from the hand of our enemies." Now see, we're still in this dark period, And they know that the Ark of the Covenant is special, and they think it's like a talisman. They think if they bring this piece of furniture out there, that's going to make all the difference, and God will give them the battle. So look at what happened. So the people sent men to Shiloh. They brought back the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord Almighty, who is enthroned between the cherubim. If you go back to Exodus 25, about verse 20, somewhere in there, God told Moses that he would meet with him between the cherubim, and he would talk with him. And this was the top of the box in the most holy place, where God would meet and commune with them. In the Psalms, you can read about he who is enthroned between the cherubim. Now, in heaven, God is actually enthroned between all the cherubim, see? But they took that very literally, the box, and between those golden cherubim on top of the box, if you bring the box, you bring God. They reduced it to that in their minds, like it was a magic thing, see? Yes. The Ark of the Covenant was at Shiloh in the tabernacle. The tabernacle was moving around, but it was at Shiloh, and they took it out of the tabernacle and they brought it out on the battlefield. So verse 5, when the Ark of the Lord's covenant came into the camp, all Israel raised such a great shout, the ground shook. Hearing the uproar, the Philistines asked, "What's all this shouting in the Hebrew camp?" When they heard that the ark of the Lord had come into the camp, the Philistines were afraid. "A god has come into the camp," they said. "We're in trouble. Nothing like this has happened before. Woe to us! Who will deliver us from the hand of these mighty gods? They are the gods who struck the Egyptians with all kinds of plagues in the desert. Be strong, Philistines." Verse 10. So the Philistines fought, and the Israelites were defeated, and every man fled to his tent. And the slaughter was very great, and Israel lost 30,000 foot soldiers. Yeah, but I thought they brought the magic box with them. But that didn't mean any of them changed their hearts or changed their minds or tried to really serve the Lord or anything like that. They just thought if they brought the box out there. See, that sort of reminds me of if you just bite the cracker, everything's okay, Or if you just say, the words, everything will be okay, and they don't change your heart and don't change your life. No, that's not the way God works, is it? God doesn't work that way. God wanted a priest that was really after his heart. He wanted a king that would be after his heart. He wanted people that would really try to do his will. Just bringing the box out on the field didn't make any difference. And so not only were 30,000 soldiers killed, verse 11 says, the ark of God was captured, and Eli's two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, died, just like the prophecy that came to the boy had said. So God wipes out the evil priesthood on that day. So then this Benjamite guy comes from the battle. He runs away, and he escapes, and he comes, and old Eli he's old, and he's fat, and he's feeble, and he's blind, and this guy comes to him and tells him what happened, and when he tells him his sons died, and then when he tells him the ark of God was stolen by the Philistines, he falls over backward, breaks his neck, and dies. And so that's the end of Eli, just like God said, okay? But if you go back to the previous verse that we looked at a while ago, right here. This is going to come upon your two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, and shall be a sign to you. Both of them shall die on the same day, and I will raise up for myself a faithful priest who will do according to what is in my heart and my mind. And I will build him a sure house, and he will go in and out before my anointed forever. So the years went by, and God did what God said God would do, because God never lies, does he? He always does what he says that he'll do. All right. So the guy said to Eli, Israel has fled before the Philistines, and there has also been a great defeat among the people. Your two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, are dead, and the ark of God has been captured. And as soon as he mentioned the ark of God, Eli fell over backward from his seat by the side of the gate, and his neck was broken, and he died. Notice what it says, for the man was old and heavy, and he had judged Israel for 40 years. Now, if you go back into the book of Judges, you'll see those same summary statements after one of them dies, and so that, the same kind of a period was continuing. Eli is considered one of the judges along with those in the book of Judges, and so is Samuel considered one of those judges, except he's of a different kind. He's of a different ilk. So you think, well, that's already a pretty weird story, but you ain't seen nothing yet. So the Philistines, they steal the ark of God, and they take the ark of God into their own territories. They take the ark of God to Ashdod, where the temple of Dagon, the Philistine god, is. And Dagon ends up, the next day they go into Dagon's temple, and he's fallen down, and his hands and feet are cut off, his head's cut off, all this kind of stuff, and they get afraid, and so they send the ark of God away from there, and they send it to another city. They send it to Gath, I think, and Ekron and some other cities. And none of the cities want the ark of God, because everywhere the ark of God goes, they've got, depending on your translation, they've got mice all over the place, or rats, depending on how your translation goes. And everybody gets tumors. They get these golden tumors, or not golden tumors, but tumors on their bodies. And so people are dying, and there's rats everywhere. Everywhere they send the ark of God, and they say, oh, we can't stand having this thing here. We got to get rid of it. So you're going to read like through 3 chapters of Samuel with this drama about the Philistines trying to get rid of the ark of God. And finally, some pagan priest tells them, what you need to do is you need to get 2 cows, and you need to hook them up to this cart, and you need to put the ark on the cart, and you need to put 5 golden tumors. I don't know how those looked exactly. 5 golden tumors in this box, and you need to put 5 golden rats in the box. Make them out of gold, and you put them in the box for the 5 cities that God plagued because of the ark, and you put it on this cart, and you send that cart out and see if it goes directly back to Israel or just wanders around. So they put the ark of God on this cart, and the cows just started straight for Beth Shemesh, which was an Israelite community, and it went straight for the territory of Israel and took the ark back home. See, God took the ark back home. However, the men of Beth Shemesh didn't know much about God either. And so, not being priests or anything, they started sacrificing the cows and doing all kinds of stuff, and God wasn't happy with them either. See? So you got chaos here. As the last verse of Judges says, everybody was doing what was right in their own eyes. And yes, God's ark belonged in the tabernacle, but the people of Israel were just as far gone as the people of the Philistines were in those days. So finally, it was taken back to Kiriath Yearim. The ark of the Lord was placed where the tabernacle then was, and everything turned out to be okay. So, look at 1 Samuel 7, verse 2. It was a long time, 20 years in all, that the ark remained in Kiriath Yearim, and all the people of Israel mourned and sought after the Lord. Now see, this is a new wrinkle. You'll find this same thing in the book of Judges, where they decide it's time to repent, and they mourn, and they begin to seek after Yahweh. So Samuel said to the whole house of Israel, if you are returning to the Lord with all your hearts, then rid yourselves of the foreign gods and the Ashtoreths, and commit yourself to the Lord to serve him only, and he will deliver you out of the hand of the Philistines. So finally, after all these years, Israelites put away their Baals and Ashtoreths and served the Lord and only. And of course, it tells you here that they did that, and of course, God delivered them from the Philistines like he'd done in the book of Judges. Look at verse 15 of chapter 7. Samuel judged Israel all the days of his life. See, and if you compare that, go back to chapter, let's see here, where it says Eli judged Israel for so many years. Let's see here, it's chapter 4, verse 18 at the end of the verse. So see, Eli was a judge, Samuel was a judge, but Samuel now is going to be a better one. All right, so we're going to do some skimming, but what I want you to do is get the storyline and get the point of the storyline. Anybody want to ask a follow-up question before we leave today? Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Yeah, she's talking about the fact that when she just read the Bible story and just digested the actual storyline that goes through the Bible, it made such a huge difference for her in understanding the Bible. And she's been a Christian for many years. And I'm telling you, it's one of the most helpful things you can do if you really want to understand the Bible better. Okay, that's enough. I'll see y'all in church hopefully in a few minutes.